You, me, and HIFMB. Stories of Science and the Sea.
Welcome to the next episode of the HIFMB podcast, and this one is very special to us because I am right now sitting in the European Commission, in the Research Executive Agency, REA, of the European Commission, because the next 2 days we will have a cluster event actually going on, the Marine Biodiversity Cluster event, where a bunch of projects that are funded by Horizon Europe, or by the European Commission, they come together and actually form this cluster and actually get to network, share talks, share problems, talk with a lot of the European Commission themselves are here. So a lot of the officers from various DGs, so Director Generals of the European Commission, they're all here. So they're basically meeting, we're all meeting together, we're discussing various problems such as restoration and bycatch. And I am actually getting two guests from this whole thing. So one person from an NGO who's working one of the projects, and one person who's actually working at the European Commission at one of the DGs. I'm getting them on the podcast and actually chat to them about their lives, their careers, the event here. This is a really cool episode, or 2 episodes. We'll split them into 2. And I hope you like it. Enjoy, and all the best from Brussels. And today I talked to Paris Vasilakopoulos, who works at the European Commission, more specifically at the Joint Research Center, and there for the KCBD, so the Knowledge Center for Biodiversity. And he is based in Italy, in Ispra. Welcome to the next episode of the HIFMB podcast and the European Commission edition today with Paris Vasilakopoulos.
Exactly, yes.
Yes,
you got that right.
Fantastic.
The first try.
Thanks. Okay, so you work at the European Commission.
Exactly.
Specifically at JRC, the Joint Research Center.
Exactly.
Can you get into that? What is the JRC?
The Joint Research Center is one of the Directorate Generals of the European Commission that is unlike others in the sense that it actually employs more above and foremost scientists. Yeah. So the JRC essentially does science for policy. It is the scientific arm of the European Commission, and what we do is that we support with scientific knowledge different parts of the Commission on different subjects whenever a need arises related to some EU regulation or other legislation. Okay. So we are doing science for policy, is our motto.
Fantastic. That gets me exactly to the next question. So do you consider yourself a scientist or a policymaker, or somewhere in the middle?
Look, I mean, I have a scientific background, so my studies and my career after my studies has been like in science. And as a matter of fact, we do retain our scientific ID throughout our career at the JRC, because as I said, it's a scientific organization above and foremost. Yeah. But we are also very much involved in policy, given that our work is really focused and really supporting specific policy needs.
You said it's very different from the other DGs, and what is their main role? How are they different from the JRC, I guess?
So if you take, the policy DGs with which we interact, like the DG for the environment or for the marine environment, is that we don't really draft legislation or monitor the implementation of legislation per se. What we do is actually produce or help facilitate the production of scientific knowledge that would then inform policy decisions. So we are not taking the policy decisions ourselves to the JRC. We just provide scientific support for these decisions by the policy DGs.
Okay. So the JRC is your direct employer, or the European Commission?
Exactly. So the JRC is part of the European Commission. So it's a European Commission DG. So my employer is the European Commission.
And then the KCBD is largely you, right? So the Knowledge Center for Biodiversity.
So the Knowledge Center for Biodiversity, I know there's too many abbreviations. The Knowledge Center for Biodiversity is a body whose secretariat is hosted at the JRC. We are a team of about 17 people at the moment, right. Exactly. And our role there is to do knowledge management. So we make sure that the knowledge on biodiversity-related topics that is needed to inform European policies flows from the scientific side to the policy side. This knowledge may be produced by outside actors, like research projects, for example, or it can also be produced by in-house JRC scientists that work on different domains.
And you mentioned before it's existed since 2020.
2020. So it was one of the first implemented actions of the EU Biodiversity Strategy 2030.
Yeah, fantastic.
So yeah, it's not too young, not too old.
Yeah.
5 years old is a good age.
Have you worked there since the beginning, or have you worked there even longer?
So no, I joined the JRC back in 2016. I have a background in fishery science and marine biology. So initially I worked for the unit dealing with water and marine resources. Mm-hmm. And after 7 years there of producing scientific support to policies such as the Common Fisheries Policy and the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, I moved to the KCBD. Yeah. You noticed how I used the full names and not the abbreviations.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Yes. So that's CFP and MSFD for short.
Yeah. So you moved here. Does that mean you live in Brussels or no?
No, I moved to, that's actually a legit question. No, it was still JRC, so it was still in ISPRA. As a matter of fact, an interesting trivia, the JRC is the biggest commission body outside of Brussels and Luxembourg. So the JRC site in ISPRA hosts, I think, about 2,000 people. Yeah. It's quite big. But yeah, we're not based in Brussels. We've got some personnel based in Brussels, but the majority of it is in ISPRA, and then we also have some JRC centers in other cities of Europe, Seville, Petten, Karlsruhe, and elsewhere.
Okay, cool. And so, since you mentioned you were a scientist or are a scientist, do you still have time for research? Or?
I do. I mean, time. I mean, it's also a matter of passion, not just of time. Yeah. I mean, I'm a scientist, so I enjoy doing research, enjoy getting my hands dirty with data, with models and the likes. Yeah. So the truth is that while the majority of my work is on direct policy support, I also do some science on the side, which is of course very relevant to policy as well. But no, I mean, I want to think that I'm still a scientist.
Absolutely, I've seen your name on multiple publications and was actually very, very surprised that you still have time for that and still manage.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, but they're all relevant. I mean, the JRC doesn't discourage the production of scientific publications. Okay. Quite the contrary. Mm-hmm. As long as it's in line with policy support and with the work we do there, it's actually we, like every other scientist, we want to contribute to the scientific community with new scientific knowledge through peer-reviewed publications.
Cool. And so one of the big selling points of the KCBD is the ticketing system. Indeed. That is also quite new. And could you quickly, really briefly highlight what that is for listeners?
Sure. So the KCBD ticketing system is indeed a new tool that we introduced about 15 months ago. Mm-hmm. This was a novelty in a way that we introduced in order to make the process of accepting and managing incoming policy requests a bit more tidy, a bit more organized. Mm-hmm. Now, the JRC as a whole, and the KCBD in particular, very often receives ad hoc requests for policy support on specific fields and specific questions. Some of them are shorter, some of them are longer. And, in the past, this was carried out through a chain of emails and phone calls and without clear timelines. And all in all, it was a bit tricky to manage. Mm-hmm. Now, by introducing this ticketing system, we wanted to make things a bit more tidy. So we now have this online form that for the time being is restricted to commission officials, where they can submit their request for policy support to us. Mm-hmm. That allows us to register and monitor these requests and then follow up with responding to them.
Okay, cool. And you mentioned before you've dealt with 11 already tickets?
Yes. Yeah. Since the KCBD ticketing system came into life, we've had 11 requests. 4 of them are completed, 7 are ongoing. That's
pretty substantial.
Indeed.
Yeah. And on your background again, so you mentioned before that you actually worked on fisheries and selectivity, and today is actually the day on bycatch, incidentally, of the Marine Cluster event that we are here today. So why is the Marine Cluster event important to you today?
Well, for starters, it's a very good, a pleasant kind of coincidence that this is exactly, my background. Actually, I have worked in the past in EU-funded projects related to selectivity and bycatch, so, I saw some familiar faces also, both today and yesterday from fellow scientists. So, in that sense, it was a pleasant coincidence. But, it could be any subject. Essentially, the reason that the KCBD attends these meetings of the clusters is that these clusters of scientists are really of great importance in order to answer these requests. As I said, the ticketing system is indeed a tool that allows us to register and monitor these requests, but the actual response to these requests is typically carried out by expert panels, by groups of scientists. And we envisage that one of the key roles of these clusters, such as the cluster that met here today, will be to indeed get together in order to answer relevant requests that may arise on the topic that they are working on.
Nice. So really nicely ties together.
Indeed.
Yeah. And okay, I don't know if you have such a thing as a typical day, but what does a typical day in your work life look like?
Well, it's a desk job. I mean, we don't have really much lab or field work, unfortunately.
Unfortunately,
okay. As a marine biologist, I kind of miss a little bit the sea breeze.
Yeah, I bet.
But so essentially, when being part of a knowledge center and part of a knowledge management unit, that means that you need to interact and meet a lot of people because we are really central in this flow of information. Within the JRC, to start with, we may bring together JRC colleagues who work on different subjects with the policy DGs, particularly DGN, but also DG Mare and others. As a matter of fact, the steering group of the KCBD includes what I think is 8 different DGs, so we are really central in this.
Including yours?
Including the JRC, yes. Okay. All in all, my day is full of meetings, and then we also have, ongoing processes. You already said that we have 11 tickets that we managed. Yeah. Managed means that we need to organize relevant meetings. We need to keep track of what is discussed in these meetings and what are the next steps. We need to draft minutes or draft documents or draft reports. So, the management of a ticket, it really involves a lot of, work that is specific to the needs of each and every ticket, each and every request.
So, and I've heard that a lot of the contracts, I guess, from the JRC are not permanent.
Well, yeah, I mean, we have like every other organization, I guess. I mean, there's different contract types. Yeah. I mean, there's permanent personnel. There's contracts with a specific duration. There's also this formula of external providers where we hire people that are paid by an external company. So, yeah, I mean, like every other organization, there's a variety of different contracts.
Okay, but you're permanently there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, myself, yes.
All right. Then the reason why I'm asking is now that you've experienced science and, well, I guess still science, but within the European Commission, would you go back, or are you happy with where you are?
Look, to be honest, I mean, there's pros and cons working on a purely academic or scientific setting and working in this science for policy setting. I mean, there's different challenges, there are pros and cons. I mean, I do enjoy working in a setting that we support policy because in a way that allows you to see the result of your own scientific work or facilitation, whether we do, more directly feeding into specific policies that change the way the world works. At the same time, obviously, in an academic institution, you have much more time and range of topics that you can choose from and work on. So, in a way, one could say that it's a bit more exciting or changing, while we are more confined in a way to do science for policy. With all the pros and cons, I would say that actually I do enjoy my current role and my current nature of duties.
Fantastic. And so the last question. Just from your name, I actually never asked you, but I assume you're Greek?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I would say from your accent, I mean, that would actually be more revealing.
Yeah, all that. And what is your favorite European sea?
That's an easy one. There's the Mediterranean.
Yeah, of course.
And actually, I would say, in particular, the Ionian Sea. The sea between Greece and Italy, because my hometown is right, on the coast of the Ionian Sea.
Yeah, I was going to bet that. Excellent. Indeed. Cool. Thanks very much, Paris.
Thank you, Jan.
Have a good one. Thanks.
Want to dive deeper? Surf over to hifmb.de or follow us on Twitter at hifmb_OL.